We've been complaining about what appears to be the intentional degradation of our educational system for years now. If you went through the state school system in the UK, as I did, you will know exactly what I mean. Just listen to the man in the street interviews from the 1960s compared to those done now, and it is crystal clear that those people then have something that we don't have now. Put simply, we're being dumbed down by the powers that be on purpose, but we don't have to accept this perpetual lowering of standards. We are still a free people, and it's time to do something about it. This is why we have created courses.lotuseaters.com, a platform on which we are now offering courses which are tailor-made to reconstruct the education that has been denied to us. The first course we have available is Dr. Nima Parvini's excellent Trivium, a tripartite course consisting of logic, grammar, and rhetoric, which is the foundation and backbone of a classical education. This course will make you a better writer, speaker, and thinker, and it used to be that every 12-year-old in the country would take it. Personally, I will be doing this course with my own children to ensure they get the benefits of it for their whole lives, but it's never too late to do it, and I really think you should. We will also be producing many other courses in the future on subjects which are not topics of idle interest, but which instead will level you up as a person and make you more effective in the real world. I want to be clear, these are not YouTube videos. They are university-level lectures and coursework with a test at the end to which you will have to apply yourself. In these, we are not offering you an easy life. We are offering you the foundations of what you will need to be a part of the ascent of our civilization out of the hole that was dug for us. They are not easy, but they are rewarding. They are an investment in yourself that will provide you with skills that you will use for the rest of your life. Courses.lotuseaters.com. We will see you there.
So I'm going to move on today, and I'm going to get rid of this and move on to my part, which is this. The ex-army chief issues a World War III warning and brands the new excess of power as more dangerous than Nazis. This is all part for me in the context of what I see now is a very growing and concerningly growing rhetoric across the West, where we're beginning to manufacture consent for World War III. And what I'm going to show in this kind of segment is the way that they're preparing the public in 6 different segments. Now, I think what you'll see as we go through this, ladies and gentlemen, part of the reasons why we were late today is because I had a whole load of links, and it's my apologies to the team that this didn't work. So after the show, I will actually recreate all those links that you can see in the whole links after the show, but there'll be lots more than what we're going to talk about here, because I think it's important to see how all the categories I talk about are being used in the US, in the EU, in the UK, in order to try and persuade the public, not just to this year, but over the next coming decades, to prepare ourselves for what I think will be a war of all wars, to be honest, particularly where we are. So I begin here in the UK as part of preparing the public for defining the enemy. And you have a number of things, actually. I don't think I could see in terms of flank. Here we have General Sir Patrick Sanders, who talks about, he's a former military chief, Sandhurst, and he talked about the need that Russia, China and Iran were the new Axis power, and a third world war could break out within the next 5 years. Think about the time scale of that by the time of 2030, and that these people, these countries, are a greater threat than the Nazis were in 1935 because they're more independent and more aligned than the original Axis powers. I do want to look at that language. The date of this was in May, I believe, of 2021, July. In April of 21, the House Speaker of the United States is one of the links I will put up.
Wasn't it say 24?
24. In 24 was Mike Johnson, and he said almost the exactly same language. The new Axis powers of Russia, China, and Iran. Following that, about a month after this, came an article from NATO's think tanks talking about the new Axis powers of Russia, China, and Iran. So clearly, our military and intelligence services had created the framework And that was how they were going to begin this, by defining who the enemy is and letting the public know who that enemy is. This was published across many, many websites, not just here, in many, many mainstream newspapers. And so what we already start to see now is that argument is now being consistently used in our current media. The next thing that we see here is what I call in Politico, and I'm trying to find in terms of that, without European rearmament, NATO is setting itself up for failure here. I think this actually is more of a little bit later on when we're talking about the money. But I think this is an important point here in Politico, which has always been a very kind of pro-EU, pro-the establishment arguments. They've used a very clear mainstream argument of military intervention, that of the Atlantic Council. And with the war in the Ukraine advancing, the West has finally awakened up from its strategic slumber, facing up to the threat Russia poses in Europe. Now, we've heard this since before the war in Ukraine, and now it's emphasized, and we need to put more aid packages, more military weapons towards Ukraine, because what we're doing is we're creating the military knowledge, technological knowledge, the groundwork knowledge of how to deal with a war with Russia. Not now, but later on. One where we have 175 million people in Russia and we have 975 million people in the EU. Bigger numbers. Our kind of GDPs dwarf that of Russia. The amount that we spend in military aid in NATO dwarfs that of Russia. But nonetheless, this is where we're going. We're warning the public that this is necessary. And so I think that if we go here into the next stage, we look at this, which is the next stage of this is part two. We now need to look at our neighbours. Who are our allies? The US, UK and Australia say Japan could join part of the AUKUS pact. I don't know whether you say AUKUS or AUKUS pact, but here we're now looking over to neighbours across the globe and saying, come, this is coming. At the moment, you've got UK, where we in Europe, we're going to take on Russia. US and Australia are going to take on China. Japan, come and join us as part of our team. You must be the part of the team that's essential, and as they say here, statement from the Security Minister made, mounting focus on Chinese threats in Asia. Japan, you could be taken over by China. You will be controlled by them. The usual fear threat. So join us in this battle. So you've got NATO talking about a China problem, and you saying, here mates, we're the team together, come and join our side now. Stage two. I'm going to go down then into, you've got to increase defence budgets as the third section. And so here we have, this carries on here. NATO are planning to open a Japan office to deepen Asia-Pacific ties. I thought NATO was about the North Atlantic Treaty, about defence. Now they're saying we need to go across the Asia-Pacific. So you're drawing a new line with that of China. We're drawing a Cold War, but that Cold War is very open. It's not cold. This is mega warm. We're actually feeling this. So neighbours, defining the enemy, then we need to spend. And we need to spend like mad. So I don't know what this part is coming in. Where we have here, we've got this section here now. Very clearly is the third section is we now need to boost our spending on the military. Stage 3 of all part of this control package. And we've got the Pentagon talking about here reinvesting 50 billion into the Trump defense priorities. But more importantly, you've got to look down into this article from Reuters, which talks about how Peter Hesketh is using money. And much further down here, you can see an even bigger number of 895 billion in defence spending for the fiscal year September 30. Just look at that number. Nearly $1 trillion in 1 year is going to be spent on defence spending in the US. That dwarfs anything that Russia has. It's mega.
Yep.
But we've also just heard that a deal is being done with Saudi Arabia, with the US, for 192 billion in defense spending. And why is Saudi Arabia now spending that much money to the US? Who are they going up against a war with? The UAE? Certainly not Israel. They're not going to try and take over Lebanon or Syria now that they've allowed the terrorists to come in from the light and take control. The whole part of Saudi Arabia is that their weaponry now is to part of the third tier, which is to take on Iran. So we now know that we're going to be spending militarily huge numbers in Europe for Russia, huge amounts of money in the Middle East against Iran, led by Saudi Arabia, and the US and Australia bringing in Japan, no doubt the Philippines, no doubt Taiwan, up against China. So the organizations are being created in military spending. Then we've got to carry on with training in terms of defining the war zones. Now, in this part, I just want to say we've defined those war zones, in my view, against the kind of axis of evil. But here we've got the US are going to train to enable Arctic dominance. And this comes from the Army military, the US Army themselves. There's lots of military bases that you've got. They're talking about how they're training in the cold, how they're training to take on the Russians at the north. So this multidisciplinary way of defining the globe and training for it. So they're preparing for this very, very carefully, I think. And I set up different zones. You've got NATO talking about its China problem and their plans for the Indo-Pacific, putting out bases. The United States are now doing many, many campaigns of training. We've just had the UK is sending our own ships down for a major training program in September, which is going to bring Australia, European countries together, all to see into the straits with China, even threatening to go through the Straits of Taiwan, which China have threatened them not to do so far. We haven't done it last time, but we're going right up to the edges. So this is about now defining the war zones and the participants in that. And then I think here is the next thing that I find completely concerning. I call it increasing the numbers to die. They're going to actually let you know that you're going to die, but we need to have you to die. So because you're aware that you're going to die, and you're aware that maybe your nation states in Europe no longer represent the values that you want, or you want to protect them, why would you go away and fight for your country that you know might get militarily charged with a defence back in the UK? You're preparing it for a country that you don't really like. So what are they going to say? Conscription. Well, we know what conscription has done in Ukraine.
Yes.
Thousands
Eliminated a generation.
Yeah. You've murdered a generation. Those who are wealthy enough or part of the elites or go to university, who are all the big backers of the war, we're back at the EU, we're all at university, I'm studying philosophy, PPE, all the rest of it. We've avoided war, but the working class, you can go off and die.
Yes.
The working class in this country don't want to die. The working class in Europe don't want to die. So what are they going to do? Conscript us. Because you are the fodder first. Not the ones that will stand and not fight for the country, not the ones that we believe should be in your article running our moral values of the state. No, we won't put them in. So we're going to conscript you, and we're going to make sure that you're aware of it now, that this is going to happen.
Yes.
So we're leading on the message 5. And then I think I'm going to go through quickly here next section is what I call the technological warfare, sanctions, tech bans, financial isolation. We're pretty aware of what happened with Russia. Okay, we've removed billions from them, took them out of the financial system. But the EU has also adopted the 12-pack of sanctions here as it continues what it says the illegal war against Ukraine. But we have tech isolation against Chinese companies. TikTok is the classic example. You're not allowed to be a successful Chinese tech company in the US, so you have to sell your assets or not be able to be there. Huawei, which is one of the best phones I've ever had, wasn't capable of being able to be used. They were taken out of major contracts on telecommunications in the UK. You see lots of packages going through the Senate at the moment and Congress in the US to ban various Chinese companies from being able to bid for contracts at all. Same is now beginning to happen in Europe too. So these are 6 levels of the preparation for war against them. I mean, I would say there's a 7th, which is how we're now using movies and films to define Russians as gangsters, China as gangsters.
So let me just sort of try to come in here with a couple of quick comments. The most striking thing about the Russia-Iran China alliance is how unnatural it is.
Mm-hmm.
Russia at some point gave the Iranians, I think, faulty centrifuges for their nuclear program as a way of sabotaging them, because the Russians don't want Iran with nuclear weapons. They're competing in Central Asia and in the Caucasus. They don't need that. China and Russia are natural competitors over the Far East, over Central Asia, etc. So forcing them into an alliance is mainly the result of the same establishment that has been pushing endless escalation everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The same people who went to Iraq, the same people who went to Libya, the same people who backed the jihadis in Syria, have pushed Russia, China, and Iran into a unholy alliance that would probably break down if Trump were able to make a deal with Iran and make a deal with Russia over areas that concern them. With China, there's a real challenge and there's a real problem. And you certainly don't want the Chinese controlling your telecommunications networks for the same reason you wouldn't want any foreign entity controlling them.
Yeah, but we have Microsoft, we have Google, we have Apple. They're all controlling our networks.
But the Americans are...
I ask you this, this is a general point. Would you rather the CIA being able to monitor what you're actually saying, or whether you'd like the Chinese? Because personally speaking, I don't care if the Chinese are monitoring my phone, because whether I'm going shopping in Sainsbury's or doing something on X, they're not going to have two hoots about it. But the US will ban me. They'll lead you to losing your job.
I think that with the American establishment being captured, the priority should be to uncapture it, not stop it for the Chinese.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather have us just being able to be free from whoever. I don't want anyone controlling me.
Yes.
I don't want any security services.
But given that you're stuck in the West,
yes,
and that in the West there is an empire, and the leaders of this empire is the United States,
yes,
you're sort of stuck with reality.
In the hope that they actually make things better for us.
Yes.
I have several questions here. Pardon me for interjecting, but one thing is, in a way, I think most alliances are a bit unnatural. For instance, the alliance between the US and the Middle East right now could be seen as unnatural in some cases. But apart from this, I don't know to what extent this is just the rhetoric that accompanies an arms race, which just tries to panic the other side in order to destroy them economically. Because you could say that Trump has come in, he's going to try to do what Reagan did with the Soviet Union, vastly outspend the Soviet Union militarily speaking. So all this is just a cultivation of rhetoric, of preparation. And I don't know to what extent we rush into portraying necessarily this as an assault on the other side, whether it could be a defensive war. We don't know yet whether it's a defense or an attack. In some cases, there is such a thing as the rhetoric that if you want peace, prepare for war, and sometimes a very aggressive rhetoric could help. But are we robbing others of agency if we're saying that this is 100% what the establishment is doing?
See, my view on it is, I agree with where you're saying in terms of Trump is trying to solve the issue with Russia, because I don't think it's a natural alliance. It actually feels as though it's more European. It wanted to join NATO straight after Gorbachev. It felt that it should be part of us, working towards it. And I would much rather to see that sort of link. And my hope is that Trump recognizes that, the team recognizes that we can end this war and we can move to a much more European base, not based on a group of elites that have come out from the Democrats or the deep state that see this as a financial benefit for them by having this war. I think also then you've got the economic point with China, which is growing, and that's a challenge for anybody. And you've got the kind of free market element of us that's saying, let's do trade. I'm quite happy with that, as long as there's no espionage. And I think, therefore, my hope is that Trump's team can work a way that we can get to the trade and actually send a message. We don't want the espionage as well.
I think
that's more
China
difficult.
will always be a rival because it's a different civilization.
Yeah, and that's much more
Set
difficult.
of values with a different identity, with a different ethnicity, and I think that these things matter. I think we unfortunately naturally divide along ethnic and religious lines everywhere.
I understand that too, but
Can we have a spheres of influence arrangement with China that says you stay in your lane and we stay in ours? That's one possibility.
that's a possibility. Much better one than going to war.
Much better one than going to war. Or do we end up stuck in a competition where through the perfidy and recklessness of the existing elite, the Chinese get two wonderful natural resource suppliers, Iran and Russia,
Exactly.
feeding their military machine? I think these are the realistic options that we face.
And this is where the problem comes in.
And I think to Stelios's point, it's not just that the Western elite wants the confrontation. There's an element in China that believes that it must prepare for a full confrontation with the West, and that this is the only way to guarantee China's place in the world and its own security.
Exactly.
So it's not. I would cast it as definitely the elites on both sides. I would say that Western elites have been giving the advantage to China by insisting on a simultaneous conflict with China and Russia and Iran.
Yes. And this is why I take the view that the axis of evil element is the preparation. I would argue that these are all characteristics of that preparation. Do I believe it's necessary? No. Do I believe there are alternative routes that we should be looking for? I do not want to see the regime of Iran being able to solidify itself by having an amalgamation with Russia and China, in which you've got resources and weaponry that I'll come on to. I'd much rather have our kind of patriotic parties taking control of our nations, removing the woke element that's in there, turning back parts of what they're destructive economic arguments, and then leading to saying to those people who are the next generation of Russia that you can come and join us, as we promised in before, but let's have some trade, and you've got to recognize some values that you've got to respond to. And that way that we can then deal with China on its own, rather than preparing a war against all three countries.
Yes.
But if I'm just going to quickly go through this, I look at this because this is what China has just published in terms of its first aerial mothership. I'm sure we've got the same. But this is a range of 7,000 kilometers, and it has over 100 small drones, 1,000 kilograms of missiles. They are preparing for this exactly as you've just talked about for us. Mm-hmm. Their elites are going to say, we do not want to stand here and be walked over by you. So we do need to have some sort of level of preparation. But then you've got these Chinese soldiers here who are harking back to when they lost millions to Japan.
Yes. They
have a pride in their military that we don't. We'd rather have wokeism and the flags.
You have pride in your military.
Yeah. You do have pride in your military. So they've got the kind of mentality to say we're going to produce it. We've got pride in our military. This kind of automatic production line of weapons that they've got. So they're preparing for this.
Just a point about this. This is the missile that brought down the Rafale jets in the India-Pakistan confrontation.
Yeah, and I'll turn around and say here, this is the plane that they do. This is the plane that they're really happy about.
And the J-10 is the older model.
Yes.
They are building things that are much more capable and much more advanced that can perhaps outcompete the F-35.
That's correct. And this is it.
Yeah.
So I get it. On the one side, the military guys are going, we need to put 895 billion in to compete where China is already ahead of us in so many ways, or caught up in so many ways. That is understandable. My view is that everybody's doing this and it will lead to the war. The preparation of it will lead to war unless we get smart people, which I believe we're starting to look at that with saying, let's do a deal with Iran, let's do a deal with Russia. Perhaps these are the people that will end this, and then we could have some sort of stay in your lanes argument with China, if that would work. Not sure that would actually work with the Chinese elite. themselves. Many of them still feel they need to be on a greater par with the United States or greater than the United States.
Yes.
That's much more difficult, but I'd rather that we deal with this than actually prepare for war, which I think these are the stages that we've got.
Mm.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.